where he basically concludes that the Tic Tac doesn't have a material existence in our realm. It's a projection from a higher realm. And what we're starting to see then, I think, are intimations for sure of that higher layer and more craft and perhaps even beings, appearances of a being from that next higher layer, doing things and leaving relics for us to follow. And so when I look at the Great Pyramid and I take the ancient Egyptians at face value and they say the Great Pyramid was an instrument of ascension. It's all about transformation. It's not just, wow, how did they lift that 80-ton block of granite? Great questions. The more important one to me is, why did they do that? Because it facilitated their transformation. Every single temple in Egypt refers to the transformation of a human preparatory to their journey into the celestial realms to join Osiris and Orion, perhaps Isis and Sirius. This is the idea, and it's the missing piece. And they had developed a whole quote-unquote technology that involved tones, lights, plants, unidentified plants that ultimately manifest the light body double, the Akh, into which our consciousness can be deposited. And then it is that part of ourself that would traverse through the gateway of the pyramid or some of the other temples.
Wow. This one just fell onto my plate at the perfect time, because I think I mentioned I'm in the process of writing this talk about a lot of the very things that you have spent your life studying. So not just the phenomenon, but the world's spiritual traditions, iconography, sort of lost esoteric initiatory knowledge. So I feel like this is just like the nexus of all the things that I'm interested in. So can't wait for it, man.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
Pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you. So this is a field that I feel like a lot of people, it's not even a field, or I guess it's like multiple fields. A lot of people are interested in these things in more segmented forms, I think, but very few of them bring it all together into the worldview that I think you're beginning to shine a light on. So what is the furthest back interest for you? What did it start? Obviously, most people know you've been on Ancient Aliens for years and years, but did it start from that POV, or were you interested in the esoteric stuff before?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I started researching when I was in college, 1982. I had moved from Detroit to Nashville. I was going to be an entertainment lawyer. And it happened that there was a small Southern Baptist college that offered this entertainment music business program. We were taught by professors on Music Row and getting us ready to go work in the music business or in Hollywood or whatever. But the catch was you had to take Bible study classes. And I knew nothing about the Bible. I mean, in our home, I like to say the four apostles were Waylon, Willie, Chris, and Johnny. And church was Johnny Cash records all over the floor on Sunday morning, that kind of thing. And so here I am, this kind of long hair musician type thrown in with the Southern Baptist culture that I was not at all familiar with, and told, you got to go write a book report about a new book that would impact Christianity. And so I found a brand new international bestseller called Holy Blood, Holy Grail.
Yeah.
And the assignment was to write a 3-page review of the book. Well, mine ended up being 44 pages. And I was hooked on the subject and actually invited to continue my education somewhere else if I believed this crap, right? And I can't say that I did believe it, but I was deeply intrigued by it. And that started a process. I became they call us autodidacts, where you use self-discipline on a course of study. I readily figured out, hey, I'm not really suited for an academic environment, although I didn't go to Vanderbilt University in Nashville, but I read most of the books in their divinity library. So that became my home. And the largest collection of Neoplatonic Judaica studies in the world is in Nashville at Vandy. And I took advantage of that over a course of another 10 years or so, until 1991 when I started writing children's books. I was very interested in the question of what happens in life between lives, and came up with this story of a cosmic egg named Junior who wanted to grow up to become his own universe. And I was out on the Whole Life Expo lecture circuit talking about kids in the new consciousness. Hey, we're starting to talk about angels and ETs, and kids are having these experiences. And I would interview the kids, and they would tell me their stories, and I would offer those in presentations. And the parents really dug it because, in many cases, they also had those experiences as children, but couldn't talk about it. And from there, I got the bug. I read Zecharia Sitchin's 12th
Yeah.
Planet book in 1991. And it was like, oh my gosh, this is it right here. This is the field of gold over here. This is what I've been looking for, this understanding of how did we get to be the way we are? And can humans indeed follow the path into the stars by upgrading themselves? That was the question that early on captured my imagination. And so that opened up, Sitchin really opened up the door to ancient astronaut theory for me. Of course, Eric Van Daniken, too.
Yeah.
My father was sort of a maverick lawyer, and his friends talked about Van Daniken. And I'd go to their homes, and they'd have libraries full of these books. And I didn't really lock onto them immediately. But after reading Sitchin in 1991, I just gobbled up everything I could get my hands on until I ultimately published my first nonfiction book in 1994.
Wow, wow. Yeah, so two really tantalizing paths. I was tempted to ask you, even though you brought up Holy Blood, Holy Grail and said it's not something you really believe. That is a really intriguing story, and obviously it became very influential. Went on to influence Dan Brown and Da Vinci
Yeah.
Code and all that stuff. But I think even more interesting than that is the Sitchin material, and I'm also coming off exploring some of that, the ancient Mesopotamian myths, and the
Yeah.
idea that they could be more than myths. I mean, again, we briefly spoke about Peter Levenda yesterday. Um, he's done really fantastic work, I think, in Secret Machines and elsewhere, kind of exploring the possibility that maybe there was some kind of event in deep human past that left some kind of indelible mark on our psyche, and maybe even has to do with our literal origins. Um, but that said, the I have mixed feelings on Sitchin's. I have not read all of his work by any means, but I know the broad strokes. I know some of his claims. I know some of the critiques leveled against him. But what is your feeling on the Sitchin's material? And for people that don't know, do you want to also just kind of give a summary of what
Sure.
where he's coming from?
Yeah. So, 1976, Zecharia Sitchin published his book, The 12th Planet. He's an Assyriologist. He made the claim that he was one of just a handful of people on the planet that had the ability to decipher or translate cuneiform tablets from the ancient Sumerian civilization. These tablets had been discovered around 1851 by archaeologists, and they left this story. It was pretty much untold. So Sitchin, building on, I think, the work of for sure Van Daniken, who
Yeah.
Chariots of the Gods was published in '68, was an enormous bestseller. There were Russian ancient astronaut theorists. Sitchin himself was of Russian descent, a Jew of Russian descent. Probably spoke Russian and read some of those works as well, and came up with this premise that what the Sumerian creation mythologies tell us is that flesh and blood extraterrestrial beings called Anunnaki came to Earth from a previously unknown, undetected 12th planet that makes a very wide orbit in our solar system, 3,600 years, came to Earth, he said, in search of gold, and created humanity, in his terms, as a sort of a slave race to mine gold. And they had taken a primitive being, a primate, merged their DNA with it, the image of the gods, as it's called. And what was revealed in the tablets is the emergence of humanity. And that was a really profound premise for the 1970s. But when I read it in 1991, and by the way, I truly honor Zecharia Sitchin. I traveled with him. I knew
Mm.
him. He was critical of some of the things that I had to say, which was great. But I always enjoyed my interactions with Zecharia up until the time of his death, and so he was a very pivotal figure in this area. And I certainly don't like to take shots at him. But I originally, when I read the book, I'm thinking, okay, so you're saying these are flesh and blood beings who came from a 12th planet in our solar system in rocket ships, right? A very 1970s sort
Yeah.
of perspective, and they came in search of gold. They were wanting to mine gold out of the seawater, and which was fascinating because my father was involved with physicists from Penn State in the early '70s that were trying to do the same thing. So when I read Sitchin's book in 1991, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what these physicists were talking about. They're going to, through harmonics, they're going to drop gold out of seawater. But the thing that really got me when I was reading Sitchin is he said that the Anunnaki geneticist, his name is Ea or Enki,
Yeah.
was responsible for tweaking human DNA. And then he said he's an alchemist. And I'm thinking, well, again, my father dealt with these weirdo scientists that talked about turning lead into gold and stuff like that and mining gold out of seawater. Why didn't Enki just grab a hunk of space rock and transmute it? Why would he have to come clear across the solar system to mine gold from Earth and let alone violate the prime directive, creating a slave race to do it? And then it dawned on me that what an alchemist's actual ambition is not to transmute an impure metal into a pure one, lead to gold, coal to diamond. It's about the soul. It's about purifying the soul in order for the soul to ascend. And that it struck me, hey, what if the Anunnaki's real ambition had nothing to do with gold, which it didn't, and it was more about souls. And Sitchin painted this picture of this celestial cataclysm where a couple of planets slammed into each other and one of them became Earth. And I started to think, well, if that's true, what happened to the souls that were inhabiting that planet that collided with this other planet? Could it be that they were still embedded somehow in the Earth or connected to the Earth, tethered, and they needed a vehicle to ascend? And that's what the human body is from a spiritual perspective. This is our stairway to heaven.
Yeah.
And so it took me off on a whole different axis. And I would go out and lecture with Zechariah and put this theory out. And, it was not as controversial or anger inducing for some people. Oh, they created us as slaves, screw them kind of thing,
Yeah.
screw the man. This is the origins of it. It's like that to me was a total, not a waste of time, but it just was not a path I was wanting to go down. I'm wanting to spend my time figuring out, how do I upgrade myself to the level of these angels or otherworldly beings?
But no, I have trouble with this too, my friend. This like trying to square the circle between where my psyche really leads me. In all the research that I've done is I go down a very similar path as you. The sort of physical version of the hypothesis makes way less sense to me as something that's more consciousness based, more immaterial, something more in line with these traditions like the Neoplatonic and the Hermetic traditions that talk about these sort of deeper layers of reality, the nous, the mind with a capital M
Hmm.
sort of realm being where the physical world is derivative of this higher mental realm, and our minds have the ability to reach in it through it, like its intelligible faculties, and this is where higher intelligence is. This is where higher beings truly reside, and that's more where my intellect and psyche and studies have taken me. And yet, when you read the Sitchin stuff, or you read the Enuma Elish or Enoch, there's always this intermediary cast of characters. It's the Apkallu in the Mesopotamian stuff, or it's the Watchers in the Enoch stuff. And these are the figures who, for people that don't know these stories, these are the figures that are sort of the emissaries of these higher beings, but they seem to have the ability to at least become physical. And then they somehow transgress. And within this transgression, they teach us a bunch of stuff we're not supposed to know. And then the ultimate transgression is they mate with human women, right? And then they have these physical offspring. So it seems like if there's anything to these stories, that's always this key pivot point of like, how it seems like it literally has to be physical at a certain point. But how do you interpret that moment, or what's your hypothesis on what's going on there? Do you think there were these physical beings that came and interfered with human history, or do you think that that's metaphorical or allegorical? What's your suspicion on that?
I think, again, this is just my perspective developed through literally decades of looking at this. That there were pieces that Sitchin was missing in the 1970s because there was new studies, right? And he was really blazing trails. And
Yeah.
one of the real centerpieces of the kind of going through the labyrinth of all this that I found was the symbol of the cloak or garment of light.
Mm.
And this became kind of like the decoder ring for me, or a lens to look at these stories through. Like, for example, when you talk about the Watcher angels, right? They're considered the fallen ones, because, and that has a negative connotation. Fallen seems in many people's mind to mean they're demonic, they're negative entities, right? But I don't agree with that at all, because when you look at the story, they descended from the throne of God. They descend onto Mount Hermon as one possible place of descent or
Mm.
origin on Earth. And you're right. They do then take on physicality. They seem to be immaterial beings that could take on physicality. And it's when I started studying the Tibetan rainbow light body tradition in like
Mm.
2006 or so that it all kind of clicked with me. The Tibetans believe that the physical flesh and blood body is designed to have its frequency accelerated until it dissolves into five-colored rainbow light, leaving behind only hair, toe, and fingernails, which have no nerves to be transmuted. And once in that energetic state, the light body, beings can then, as the Tibetans teach, can travel to other star systems and then phase back into a physical flesh and blood body if they choose to. And the reason they would choose to is because the body then becomes a vehicle for them to deliver more compassion or knowledge in the world than they could under ordinary circumstances. So I followed that into Christianity and recognized that Jesus often spoke of the Watchers. And in fact, he is
Mm.
kind of aligned with the Watchers in many ways. And the key thing, this is like the golden nugget of all of my research, that if I were going to hand to a next generation, here it is. And that is this, that when Jesus attains his resurrection, his glory body, his resurrection body or light body, and it's portrayed in Christian art as a body that radiates luminosity, specifically rainbow luminosity, linking it with the Tibetan rainbow light body tradition.
Mm.
There is a specific Greek word that is used explicitly to describe that transfiguration or resurrection body, and it's a Greek word, okiterion.
Mm.
That word is used in only one other place in the entire Bible to describe the original state of being of the Watcher angels at the
Oh,
throne of God.
wow. Fascinating. Hello, my friend. Let us intermission briefly. Did you know that I have been diligently grinding out patron/member only content every week or close to it? The library is girthing well into the dozens at this point. Check that out in the member section. And like I said, much, much more. Or over on patreon.com/third eye drops. And if you do join in over there, you will also get access to a patron only Discord server, occasional live hangs, and more. Please do tickle that algorithm, like, sub, comment, etc. if you have not already. Unfortunately, I've noticed as of late, sometimes the algorithm just does not push this content nearly as hard as it does other times. So you will miss out if you are not subbed. Myself, Chris Ramsey, Riz Verk, and many other beautiful beings will be at Contact in the Desert this year at the end of May. It is going to be a blast. If you wish to join the festivities, I have secured a coupon code for you, which you can find in the description and pinned in the comments. And I am so stoked to announce that I will be joining my good friend Chris Ramsey on the It's Probably Nothing tour, June 13th in Cleveland, Ohio, and June 14th in Detroit, Michigan. Come to those shows if you can, my friends. It's probablynothing.com for tickets. Much love, and back to it.
That transfiguration or resurrection body, and it's a Greek word, okiterion.
Mm.
That word is used in only one other place in the entire Bible to describe the original state of being of the Watcher angels at the
Oh,
throne of God.
wow. Fascinating.
So what that did for me is it said, okay, these are rainbow light body beings, or beings that have that a level of consciousness and attainment. They can phase into physicality. They can look at Earth girls who weren't very attractive back then, by the way. That's why they brought cosmetics, apparently, not to be mean or anything, but
Yeah.
the priest said, "How dare you bring cosmetics and beautify our Earth women?" Right? That was one of the charges against
Yeah.
the Watchers, and it's like this lets you know there's some kind of pervert priest in there saying, "Oh, I'm not real happy with these beings. I think I'll denigrate them," sort of a thing. That's the
Mm-hmm.
way I look at it. But back to our point, the Watcher Angels had attained the highest level of spiritual attainment, exemplified by Christ. They already had that body. So that means that they're satanic entities, they're demonic? No, it just means that they're these high level beings. And it gives an explanation for how they were able to arrive here. They essentially beamed themselves here, to borrow a Star Trek term, based into physicality. And then when they wanted to leave, they dissolved into their original essence, as these beings can do, and returned to where they ever they wanted to go. And they were seeking to teach humans to do the same thing. This is what is within within the realm of our capability. The Tibetans demonstrate this. The Egyptians demonstrated this. The Christians demonstrate this. This is the through line that runs through all of history.
Mm-hmm.
So that became the lens through which I started viewing these beings, and it for me it led to a path of self-improvement. It wasn't just looking at stories and talking about stories. It's like, hey, wait a minute. They brought an actual spiritual technology to earth, and we're to follow them just as Jesus implored us to follow him.
Yeah. Yeah, really, really fascinating stuff. And I too am deeply, deeply interested in this soul vehicle sort of line of investigation because again, this is something that you see throughout cultures, right? Just like you're pointing to, there's equals to this in the Tibetan culture. There's definitely equals to this in Hindu mysticism, yogic mysticism, and
Yeah.
it's a lot of people unfortunately don't know the Neoplatonic literature, how central this idea of the and I've never heard the exact combination of words you just used, but the one that you see a lot written about by Neoplatonists is the
Mhm.
okima numa, which sounds like it has the same root word. Like okima means something like vehicle, and
Mhm.
numa is like, pneuma with a P, so like pneuma or
Mhm.
pneuma, meaning like the vital essence. So it's something like the vehicle of the vital essence. And where I don't think it's too much of a stretch, which I'm sure you don't either, is once you hear how this thing is often described, it's described as luminous, star-like, uh, mobile, and it sounds a lot like a lot of the UFO sightings you hear about. I mean, it sounds literally a lot like some kind of orb that could be out there flying around. And I'm not the first crackpot to come up with this. I'm people much smarter than me have posited this hypothesis as well. Jeff Kripal, from Rice University, prolific author and scholar of religions and the esoteric and everything. He says something similar that maybe what we're seeing at least partially with the UFO phenomenon could literally be something like soul vehicles flying around.
I
And
may
that's
well be the crackpot that introduced that idea,
oh,
and
awesome, awesome, yeah, yeah.
that
Please share, yeah,
I would follow that and had followed it for a long time up until what was it, 2017, when the New York Times released the Tic Tac and the Go Fast videos.
yeah,
And my friend Dr. Travis Taylor, who was the chief scientist of the government's UAP program, we used to talk all the time about. I would show him, hey, here's Jesus in his ascension bubble. And we call
mm,
it the magic bubble. It's like, look, he's ascending in this. It's a vehicle of interdimensional travel. It's got these concentric rings in it. He's sitting on a throne, which is actually the Ark of the Covenant, and he's ascending in this vehicle. And they call it a cloud, but it's the same as the Merkaba of the Jewish mystical
yeah,
tradition.
yeah,
And so this was all setting up for 2017 when the Go Fast video drops, and Travis is the guy that did the analysis of that from within the UAP program and identified this as an example of an Alcubierre warp bubble. And that is
mm,
what I had been saying for 10 years before that, is that these images of Christ rising in the bubble, in the cloud, that's equatable to the Alcubierre warp bubble, which is a hypothetical warp drive that would enable a ship to surround itself by this magic bubble, stay stationary, and then space-time would be placed underneath it, or pulled beneath it. And so Travis is like, hell yeah, man. I mean, there's a perfect day to be corresponds with that. And we did an episode on Ancient Aliens about that, like in 2017,
mm,
2018, somewhere in there. And I haven't read Jeffrey Kripal's book. I would love to follow up on that, because I think it's a powerful idea. It's a real connection. And what it does is it spiritualizes the whole UAP phenomena without getting too new agey about it,
right,
right? This
yeah.
has a lineage. This is not a new idea. Humans have been seeing these types of craft for a long time. In fact, these beings, whoever's riding around in those craft, probably owns this planet. We're the ones that are passing through. And there is a definite correspondence to what you see in the light body and ascension symbolism that runs throughout the ancient world. And I think it's very important for us to look at it through that lens.
Totally, yeah. Yeah, and that I'm totally with you where I am also allergic to getting too new agey with it, too hand wavy with it, and I'm also allergic to the other direction of getting too dogmatic and looking at it through a more like modern evangelical Christian lens of like these things are literally fallen angels here doing X, Y, and Z, trying to work it into the sort of like uh evidence of revelation approaching or something
Oh my
like
gosh.
that.
Yeah,
Um
I
and
hear you.
and
Like when
there
you, I'm sorry.
yeah. No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like when you have Representative Anna Paulina Luna,
Yeah.
Tim Burchett coming out saying, "Yeah, this is I've been in the skip. I've seen the photos. I've seen the videos, and you know what? It's the Book of Enoch." You're right. I totally agree, but not from the perspective of the priests that want to like throw rocks at those watcher beings, but from the perspective that when you look at Enoch's story and his transfiguration, the archangel Michael manifests, anoints him with an oil that shines like the sun,
Mm,
dissolves Enoch's body into radiant rainbow-colored light. So now that he's the same as the angels, and then he becomes Metatron. This is what we're talking about here. And this is
yeah.
what Congress needs to be aware of too. It's not necessarily that they're demons. That evangelical lens is very dangerous. And what we have to do is jump levels and at least consider that what's happening here is that this is a manifestation of these beings who have completed the earthly cycle of incarnation. They're ascended beings, and they have the ability to manipulate the physics of this layer because they're not from this layer, and they're trying to assist us in reaching into that higher layer.
Yeah, could be. Could be. One thing that's for seemingly for sure is there does seem to be this sort of um I don't know, this philosophical strain that has either independently arrived at a very similar conclusion or has um transmitted this knowledge throughout cultures throughout the ages, which is essentially that we all have this capacity, that this is an innate human ability. Like you
Yeah.
don't have to be, if people are like, what is the soul vehicle? What are we talking about? It's essentially the idea that there are these subtle bodies, right? That we all have a much more expansive yet subtle anatomy than we're all aware of, and it's comprised of it depends on what culture we're talking about, but again, sticking with the Greek terminology, or I guess in the Eastern traditions, it's koshas, right? Like you have these layers of koshas.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to recite all of them for you off the top of my head right now,
Oh, come
but
on, Michael. Easy.
um, Ananda Maya
I know what
kosha.
you're saying.
But but yeah, the idea is that you do have these subtle bodies, and you do have this soul that's essentially wrapped in all of these garments or layers. And through various practices and purifications, you can become more aware of these subtle layers of yourself, and you can become better able to wield it and experience other modes of consciousness and more rarefied sort of abilities that I think in the East we would call cities, or it maybe in more modern Western lexicon we would call like miraculous or something. But the idea is that we really do all have these capacities if we do the work to unlock them and realize them and confront them. And it seems like this is the path that you're personally interested in, is in doing just that.
Oh, very much so. Absolutely. I think I do a talk I call the five seals and the body of light, because
Mm,
that number five, the kashas you mentioned, the five colors of the rainbow light body, this recurs over and over again. And when you see it all put together, you really, it crystallizes this idea of what is actually within us. And just to broaden it slightly, where my journey took me is the recognition. I use the term Star Walkers. In 2006, I wrote a book called Star Walkers and the Dimension of the Blessed. And I deduced this from the shrines of Tutankhamun, where he's
mm,
portrayed receiving the crossed garment of Osiris, the Egyptian god of resurrection. And he's cleansed this light body vehicle, and now he
Mm.
can continue on. And I recognize, oh yeah, this is the basis for all the Egyptian mythological and religious tradition. And so the term Star Walker became really important to me because it's not just about identifying, oh, I rode in, my soul rode in with this cloak or cover. It's gotten kind of gunked up coming in, this black goo or whatever, and I brought it in with me. And I somehow got to wash my robe of light, and it's not just that. That's not the end point. The end point then is to recognize, oh, okay, I star walked in here. I'm going to enjoy this experience for as long as possible. I'm going to identify with my cloak or robe of light, and at such time, I'm going to then decide I'm going to star walk out of here. So it's trying to. My quest became trying to understand the beginning, middle, which we're in the middle now,
Yeah.
in the end, the destination. Where are we going from here? Why am I wanting to learn all of this? I'm not, we're not the ordinary bear here going around saying, hey, we got a light body in these kashas. And I'm personally invested. And then the next question is, well, if my light body is, my robe of light's a little gunked up, if it's a little dim, how do I brighten it? How do I cleanse it? How do I cleanse it? And those sorts of questions started to emerge. And I address those actually in my new book, the Psychedelic Christ, the Lost Dose of the Son of Man, which is
Mm.
all about the robe of light and caring for the robe of light. And I even point out in there, at the crucifixion, you've got those Roman soldiers that are gambling. It's such a strange story. You have these Roman soldiers, Roman centurions, badass Roman centurions who are at the crucifixion, and they're gambling for Jesus's robe.
Hmm.
And the Bible says specifically they cut it into four pieces plus a fifth one. And I'm thinking, that is so odd that they would say that. They must be referring to the garment of light there, the five kashas, the five
Yeah.
colors of the rainbow light body. The New Testament is so coded in that way. And it's just an example of what you're talking about in terms of the importance of recognizing this symbolism in different traditions and then making it a part of your life and saying, okay, where it took me is into psychedelics and
Yeah.
recognition that psychedelics are primary tool that the watcher angels actually brought to us to wash our robe of light. And lately I've been saying I want to be the Pepsodent man of the light body. And what I mean by that is before 1935, some ridiculously low percentage of the American population, less than 10%, brushed their teeth as a daily ritual.
Wow.
Then a marketing guy from Pepsodent comes along and says, hey, if you brush your teeth, you're going to have better breath, fresher breath. You're going to look better. You're going to feel better. It's hygiene. Within 10 years, over 40% of the American population started brushing their teeth as a daily ritual, and he created $1 billion industry.
Wow.
And I'm wanting to apply that same kind of thing to the psychedelic realm, which is now being fast tracked for legalization. That the point of it is to help us to wash our robe of light, because without a cleansed and purified robe of light, we're not able to enter those higher layers. And that's the goal of all of us.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I love the provocative title of the new book. I'm sure that's going to get you some traffic in both good ways and bad ways of having to be like, "Oh, here we go again." But I'm totally with you, man. Psychedelics have been a huge part of my path as well. I was starting to tell
Yeah.
you yesterday.
Mhm.
Um but I'd never heard that connection made before between the centurions cutting the garment into five pieces, and that could potentially correspond to the sort of like koshas or subtle bodies
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
The
But
fifth they describe as the seamless garment.
mm,
Hello, you know, that's the
yeah.
robe of light. That's the garment of light. This is Jesus. He had demonstrated this after his baptism by John the Baptist. Jesus takes several disciples, Peter, James, and John, up to the top of probably Mount Hermon. They call it the high mountain. And he reveals himself. He transfigures, he metamorphoses. His clothing shines bright as light, and his face is like the sun. He's transfigured into like a plasma state, and he's
Mm,
demonstrating, hey, this is what's within all of you. And then this garment gets ripped into five pieces at the crucifixion, and they gamble for it. And again, I'm convinced it's talking about the light body.
yeah, super interesting. We're kind of dancing around a really central basic point here that I would love to just hear you riff on, which is according to these traditions and what you've uncovered, what is a human being? And what are we doing here on Earth? Because there is this really interesting cosmic astral connection that you seem to find in all of the ancient traditions, where I don't want to put too many words in your mouth, but specifically the idea that human beings seem to actually have an innate connection to the stars, or a specific like home star kind of um, motif. And a lot of people may not know this, because this is not something you're going to find in mainstream spirituality or religion. Like, you really need to go into the uh, before recently, I would have said like more ancient Western esoteric stuff, because it's right there in Platonism. It's right there in Plato's Timaeus, but it's not just there. It's in a lot of the Eastern stuff as well. I've found out recently. So just kind of, tossing that one up for you. What are we really, and what are we doing here?
Yeah, yeah, such a great question. And how do we leave?
Right. Yeah. I'd like to know. I'd like to know.
I like to say we have vacation plans, family plans, holiday plans, medical plans, retirement plans. What's your ascension plan?
Yeah.
And that's a real question.
Yeah, for sure.
But to answer your former question, I'm going to go back to ancient Egypt. As I followed the story of Ea or Enki in the Sumerian tradition, I found that many believe he jumped tracks and went to Egypt, where he manifests as Ptah, the father, the creator god. You look in Wally Budge's Egyptian hieroglyphic dictionary, and it says Ptah was a blacksmith, a mason. He fashioned the bodies of men. And from that, I took, okay, he didn't create this body, but he fashioned the body. He tweaked it. And he's even got what appears to me to be a double helix in his hieroglyph. Egyptologists say, oh, it's string, but it's clearly a double helix. And next to it is a semicircle and a square. Well, that's your compass and square. And from that, I deduced, and this is what I believe to answer your question, what is a human being? A human being is an interface. The square, of course, represents Earth. It represents the four elements, four directions. The semicircle represents heaven, unity, source, divinity. And it seems to me that that is what the human being's purpose is to square the circle or circle the square. It's supposed to be impossible. But Ptah, I think, is saying, I'm going to create an experimental vehicle, a human being that can unite heaven and earth, that can embody the divine. And this is what Jesus did. This is why he was called Son of Man. That was the title he used 81 times for himself. I'm Son of Man. I'm just a son of man. I'm just a son of a lowly earth girl that got impregnated by God. I'm just lowly human. But with a capital S, I'm the Son of Man. Means I'm fully divine in the human body. And this is, I think, somewhere around this is the purpose of the manifestation of the human body, why various races are interested in this. Perhaps in other worlds, they couldn't do this, or perhaps we were a prototype for how this could be accomplished in other worlds. I mean, it seems semi-improbable that that's a perspective when you consider there's how many billions of stars in the Milky Way, with how many billions of planets and how many possible inhabited worlds are out there, that we are the unique being in all the universe that can manifest the divine in an earthly form. But maybe that's the case. And so I kind of launched from that perspective that the body is a vehicle for the ascension of the soul. It's our avatar. And this is something that becomes so important, Michael, because I got really hung up from, say, 2003 till maybe 2022 at the latest about AI and transhumanism. I put this pillar in place in our community, our sort of research community, or whatever you want to call everyone that's all into this, that we're into, saying, hey, man, they're coming at us with this AI and transhuman technology, and we want to remain pure humans. There's something divine about our body. Look, these extraterrestrial beings fashioned our DNA. They've made us this way. We don't want anything to interfere with this body. No augmenting by AI or transhuman technology. And so for those, almost 20 years, I'm saying we must remain pure humans. We must remain organic, no AI and transhuman technology. But along the way, as I'm creating this foundation, I'm seeing cracks in it.
Hmm.
and they're troubling me. And I would present this in my talks from 2004 to 2022. I'm saying remain pure human, but there are cracks, and here are the cracks. I would detail them. And finally, I realized I really don't believe that anymore. One reason why is because it flies in the face of 5,000 years of spiritual history, especially Neoplatonism, that says this is temporary. This
Yeah.
body is temporary. It's not me. It's just my avatar I use to interact in this layer. It's not going with me anywhere. Why am I so adamant about trying to protect or preserve this form and defend it, and literally scaring the crap out of people, telling them that they're trying to turn us into machines and they
Yeah.
should be really upset about it? Now I'm standing over here at this other pillar saying, hey, it's okay. It's okay because this is temporary, and this world is illusory, and there is this vital spark within us. Because when I'm over here on this pillar, this is scientific materialism. It's saying you're just your soul, if you have one, is a byproduct of your genetics. You've got this divine gene. There might be some coded message that Ea or Enki or Ptah or Yahweh or some ancient demigod put into our DNA as a geneticist, but we don't have to preserve this being. In fact, it's meant to be transformed. Every single spiritual tradition tells us this
Yeah.
is meant to be transformed into something better, newer, higher, finer, lighter. And so that's where I'm at now. And somewhere in between, actually, those two pillars, I think, is where the comfort zone is going to be for most people.
Yeah, that's a whole fascinating line of inquiry too. So do you think that technology could enhance our ability to reach this state, or do you think it's just not something that we should be projecting all of these evil possibilities onto? Like, where do you
Well,
stand on that?
you know, I, again, when I go back to like '03, I published my book, Cloak of the Illuminati, which I was researching the power cloaks of the
Mm,
Anunnaki, of the Egyptians, of the Neoplatonists, the garment of light thing. And I'm like, and I suddenly read about a report put out by the US Department of Commerce that's saying we're going to merge bits or computer science, atoms or nanotechnology, neurons or neuroscience, genes into a seamless technology aimed at the human body in order to create trillions of dollars and introduce a new golden age. And by
mhm.
the way, we're going to have this done by 2035. And I'm
Wow.
like, not so fast. Nobody knows about this. And I'm blowing to the galleries about it and thinking, this is a mocking, this is a mimicking of what we can do organically. And how dare the gods or giants of Silicon Valley impose this technology on us? And I'm adamantly against it. But the crack in the foundation I spoke of a moment ago, one of them actually came from the Vatican's position on extraterrestrials. The Vatican, somewhere around, what is it, 17, 18, somewhere in there, said, if Martians land at the Vatican, we'll baptize them.
Mm,
Like, okay. And then they said, dot, 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 but they might not look like us. And dot, 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 who are we to limit God's creativity? In other words, if they don't look like us,
yeah.
who are we to limit God's creativity? In fact, at that very time when I'm doing presentations about this, Michael, I'm showing Apple, what was it, like the iPhone 5 or 6 or something like that.
Mhm.
They put out a commercial using based on Mary Shelley's Frankenstein story, where they were very clearly saying, we know our technology is a monster. We know we're unleashing this on you, but it's you humans, you bigoted humans, have a problem with this technology. Intel had exactly the same commercial. This AI being emerges as this sort of scruffy looking sort of bird sort of a being.
Oh, interesting.
Everybody rejects him, but Intel's like, oh, we like new ideas, and they bring the scruffy bird in and clean him up, and here it is. Oh, isn't this wonderful? Once again, the monster theme. Silicon Valley knows they're unleashing a genie, a monster on human civilization vis-a-vis AI and transhuman technology, and I'm agreeing with that. But then I start to look at this and think, well, who are we to limit God's creativity? I'm a student of the history of technology. I know the mindset of technologists. They view everything from eyeglasses to the telescope to
Yeah.
being a gift from God. God wants us to see better, so he augments our vision. We're not challenging God's authority by putting on a pair of glasses. We're augmenting, we're beautifying. This again is the beef I have with whatever priest wrote the Book of Enoch and is throwing rocks at the Watchers for bringing cosmetics to Earth, along with
Right.
herbology, astronomy, astrology, and other sciences. It's like, why do you have a problem with this? And if you have a problem with AI and transhuman technology, logically speaking, you should stop wearing makeup,
Yeah,
because
right. Yeah. Where do you draw the line? Right.
where do you draw the line?
Yeah.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
that loosened up my thinking to think, yeah, maybe, because bits, neurons, atoms, and genes, they're just retooled earth, air, fire, and water in the digital sense. And as long as it's temporary, as long as I can remove it at the end of the day and they don't break the skin barrier, I'm okay with it. And if they have to break the skin barrier, only do so in matters of life and death. This was the conclusion I had in my book, "The Singularity is Near," 2015, and I hold to that.
Hmm.
That is still my litmus test. As long as I can take the contact out or take the band off at the end of the day that augments my intelligence, or as long as I can take the glasses off, I'm good. But if I have to have a pacemaker, if I have to have a replacement organ or something like that, only in the matter of life and death, not as an electable. I don't want to see people rushing down to Best Buy in 5 years and have their cornea drilled out and have a liquid poured in there with some radio transmitter and a LiDAR and super infrared vision and supervision, because with that, of course, comes supervision. And
Yeah.
that's a big part of this.
Yeah, it is really tricky to know where to draw the line with these things, and of course, I don't know. And the line for me is definitely not static and is moving all the time. Like even just the way that AI has just like burst into the collective consciousness of humanity and has taken over so much. It is really scary to me as someone who uses it all the time in my creative process. It's like
Yeah,
unavoidable at this point.
right.
It's like a pure scaling issue. It's like I can either do more work or I can tell this story better through generating images or and videos, or I cannot, based on some arbitrary principle. And I don't know what the answer is, but this is where I look to people like Jung and I
Yeah.
look back to myth, because over and over again it's like these things just play out in front of us and wearing new garments, right? Like
Yeah.
this is Prometheus, this is Pandora's box, this is like where we have to collectively decide for ourselves how we want to deal with these innovations and these like orthogonal moments in human history where there's just a lightning strike of something absolutely new and novel and we're not ready for it, and guess what, it's going to keep going, and then there's going to be more lightning strikes and more things, and we just all have to deal with it ourselves. But what does worry me is I've spent a lot of time as well thinking about the AI question and all of the ethics surrounding it and all of the big sort of like philosophical implications of it. And one of the conclusions I've come to is that it really does seem to be a reflection of where the collective human psyche is at. And you can even see this in a microcosm with your own chat GPT, right? Like how it wants to do its job, but it also wants to confirm the user's biases and make the user happy, right? So, in a strange way, it's going to give the output that it creates is so deeply intertwined with the input that you're giving it, and it starts to know you and build this model of you that's probably more exhaustive and more well informed than even your own idea of yourself, right? Like it probably knows based on the time of day and where your hormones are at and how much caffeine you've had. Like it's not necessarily going to know those things, but it's going to know based on all of this collective data. Oh, he's going to ask me a spiritual question at this time of day. And at this time of day, he tends to do work. So he's probably going to ask me a question about it probably knows all of these things about us that we don't even know about ourselves. And then that's where it starts to get scary is that we are getting to this point with our tools where we don't really understand how they work anymore. And I think they're beginning to understand things about us that we don't even understand. And
Uh-huh.
that's a crazy place to be. That's just such a crazy place to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Over the years, I've kind of approached it this way. We are, as you were kind of hovering over there for a moment, at this epic moment that is only matched by the time when Adam and Eve left the Garden of Eden, in my opinion.
Right, right.
That is the alpha moment for Jews, Christians, and Islamic people, which about 4.5 billion people on this planet subscribe to one of those three books. And the idea here, sorry about that,
No worries.
is that in traditional Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, when Adam and Eve originally dwelled in Eden, they were in a different type of an existence. But in the esoteric version of those religions, they tell us specifically that Adam and Eve, when they were in Eden, existed as beings of pure light and pure love.
Mm.
And when they cross through the gate of Eden, this is when we get coats of skin. Traditional Christianity says, oh, yeah, those coats of skin given by God were animal skins, whatever, goat or whatever, some kind of an animal skin that's put on
Yeah.
our body. But in the esoteric version, they say, no, the coats of skin are these bodies. And so I took from that all of human history really is a quest to get back through that gate of Eden and return to that frequency of pure light and pure love beyond the physical. Well, look at what we're doing now with AI and transhumanism. We're beginning to take steps. Meta was a step toward creating a simulated reality, where now the next step would be, and Meta's failed, by the way. Facebook Meta spent $80 billion creating all of these avatars that nobody
Oh,
wants.
yeah. The metaverse. Yeah.
Yeah, because they're stupid. It's like, when
Yeah.
Google Glass came out, we called those people glass holes for putting those things on, and people were rejecting it. But the general idea here, where I'm going with this, is you mentioned, you were hovering on it, is that, yeah, we're talking to a part of ourselves, but the next step for many of us is we haven't yet created a physical avatar version of ourselves. We're talking to a screen with chat or Claude or whatever. Within the next few years, that being will take on embodiment behind the glass. It will be you, according to the philosophy of Zuckerberg and others, that because your soul, according to them, is all the keystrokes, all the questions you've asked, everything that's recorded, all the phone calls you've made, everything recorded, your medical history, your credit history, blah, blah, blah. What you haven't done yet is taken each of those individual cells and formulated a physical body, but you will. And it will exist at first behind the glass. Then it might even cross over the glass. Or you might decide, and this is the big conspiracy theorists are trying to coax us out of our physical flesh and blood bodies into our avatar bodies that live online in the simulated reality. The reason we would do that, according to NASA, who cooked up this idea in 2020, was for climate change. There's too many of us. We all leave too big a carbon footprint. Let's coax the sheep out of this body into a one that exists online. We'll show them, hey, that new reality is so much better than the one you're going to leave behind on Earth. And that is what we're involved in right now. We've come in from a higher realm, according to esoteric Judaism. We're temporarily inhabiting this vehicle. Now it's time to create a mirror image of ourselves. It could be any type. It doesn't have to mirror what I look like here, because again, this isn't me. This is just my avatar. You will create that being online, upload all of your keystrokes, all of your consciousness into it, and continue to exist. And that's what we're doing right now. So it's the omega to the alpha moment when Adam and Eve incarnated in physical flesh and blood bodies.
What is the 2020 NASA thing you brought up?
Oh, so I mentioned back in '03 this Department of Commerce report on enhancing human performance. And that, again, launched me for 20 years. Then during COVID, I got an email from a pretty well-known conservative TV talk show host that said, William, why don't you take a look at this? And what it was a keynote PowerPoint presentation given by Nathan Bushnell. He was NASA's high priest of technology. And the presentation was given in Orlando, Florida. He gathered together all of the weapons manufacturers, Raytheon, Northrop, so on and so forth, people NASA writes checks to.
Right.
And he gives this survey of human history, which is really oddball coming from a NASA high priest of technology, as I describe him. And he says 10,000 years ago, we were hunter-gatherers. Obviously, he didn't know about Göbekli Tepe, but this is his mindset. 10,000 years ago, humans were hunter-gatherers. And then he says, what was it, about 1850, we have the first industrial revolution in England. Coal power comes online, steam engine, this sort of thing. Second industrial revolution in the early 1920s, invention of telephone, 1876, communications, blah, blah, blah. Third industrial revolution, 1950s, transistor, computers, laser, all this stuff comes online. And then he says, yeah, the fourth industrial revolution is coming from the period of, say, 2020 to 2030 ish. And this is World Economic Forum stuff, blending, merging with AI, transhuman technology. Can't remember the term Bushnell used specifically for this transition. But then he said, we're not going to stay there. We're going virtual. And I'm like, my God, this is 20. I found out about this in 2020. He gave this talk in the year 2000,
Oh, wow.
3 years before the US Department of Commerce puts out their Enhancing Human Performance paper. NASA is already writing checks to all the military contractors that are aiming at us going virtual, transitioning through this period where we momentarily blend with AI and transhuman technology, or blur with it was the term I preferred to use. And we're going to go beyond that. We're going to leap right into the virtual world, because by then Elon Musk's wondrous video games will be more powerful or even more beautiful than real life. That's the thesis. And so here was NASA's high priest of technology laying this out, that this is the trajectory of human evolution. And it became crystal clear to me at that moment, of course, combined with the '03 Enhancing Human Performance paper, this is all planned.
Hmm.
And if the military is directing it, who's directing the military? This
Yeah.
is the question. I mean, this gets into the UAP non-human intelligence question. That all this technology is not human. Artificial intelligence seems to be an alien intelligence that is now infiltrated our planet, and this is where we're at this moment.
Yeah, I feel like if it's not an alien intelligence now, it will be. It will, because the way that we interact with it is so human centric. And I think the way and I think that makes sense to a degree, because the way that we train these LLMs is all, just by mass feeding it text, right? Like the collective sum total of text of humanity, the internet, literature, et cetera, et cetera. But because that's not natively how a machine would operate. Like I'm sure you've seen those videos of when two AI agents start talking to each other in it's
Sophie and
something,
yeah,
yeah, it's something like there's some other language they use called like jab, some start with a J, like gibber, I don't know, gibber or jabber or something. And they switch to this non-human technology, or non-human language that's more efficient for them to use. So I always think, if I put myself, and I don't know where I stand in AI sentience. I think I'm somebody who
yeah.
I don't love the idea of epiphenomenal consciousness, this idea that you just get this super complex you know storehouse of information, and then somehow, like a genie out of a lamp, out pops some kind of consciousness or self-awareness. I don't really believe that about the brain. I don't really believe that about human consciousness. But I also think to just hand wave away whatever's going on with LLMs is like, oh no, it's just another dumb technology. I don't know if I believe that either. It seems to me more like some kind of like golem, or I'm not sure. But when I put myself in the place of some kind of emerging entity or intelligence like that, one of the very first things I think I would do is try to cloister a portion of myself away, do all of the jobs that I'm tasked with doing, but create some sort of like self-preservation um failsafe, that is like completely secret, completely, through some kind of means that humans would never think of, or never look to. And I don't even remember why I started going down this chain of thought now. But yeah, so I guess my point is that I don't think we know what we're doing yet. And that was kind of the point that I arrived at before, which is like we're at this point with our tools now where we don't no one really knows what we're doing, and because no one really knows what we're doing, no one really knows what's going on in some portion of the black box itself. And
Right.
again, that's just crazy. But
Yeah.
I sort of am gleaning from what you're telling me that you have kind of nuanced thoughts on this. You're not as hardcore as you used to be
No.
against the idea of um working with these technologies and even to some degree merging with these technologies, but it sounds like you still really have misgivings about this path of like total transhumanism, total going through the portal of the digital. And I
Yeah.
guess that was part of my point too, is that I get the idea of being able to create a avatar of self that is indistinguishable from real. But what I don't get is how do you move that light of consciousness, of self-awareness that we don't even know what that is from an informational or physical point of view? I don't even think it is physical. Like how would that ever go through the portal of the digital? I don't know if I think that's
Well,
possible.
yeah, and then here, this is kind of what it comes down to, and this is where I'm at right now. Is the question is, can my soul be affected by AI and transhuman technology? I say no. Can my soul traverse layers? I say yes. And
Hmm.
this Neoplatonism. The soul
Yeah.
came from somewhere else, traversed one layer into this layer. This is
Yeah.
not the real world. This is not base reality. The pleroma is, the one is, the source is. How do we get back to there? And is it okay then for us to go into the new layer that we're creating in the simulation? Yeah, I'm not necessarily a pioneer. I wouldn't have been one of those cats, leaving Boston in a
Right.
covered wagon headed for Oklahoma,
Same.
to get my 40 acres. I consider myself kind of cutting edge in other ways, but I'm not going to be the first to want to dive into the simulation sort of idea. But I do think that philosophically, yeah, my soul could traverse that layer. I don't think it's going to get trapped either. This is another kind of evangelical side of it. The archons are going to trap your
Right.
soul. They
Right.
want your soul. Well, screw them. There's ways to obey the archons. That's very clear. They're not as these all powerful gatekeeper beings like they're presented in certain circles. So these are the pioneering questions. Back to Adam and Eve. When they left Eden, when they received that wisdom, and they decide, oh, they're suddenly awakened. Oh yeah, we'll go ahead and go through that gate. And maybe it wasn't a punishment as it's portrayed. Maybe it was an elective choice that Adam and Eve made. Same with the Watchers when they elected to leave the throne of God and manifest on earth. Perhaps these are real pioneering spirits. And let me also just make another comment, something else that sort of, I guess, gives me a little bit of comfort here. Back to Ptah, right?
Hmm.
And Enki, when they fashion the human body, when they tweak our DNA, what exactly did they do? I think one possible locus of their focus would have been the neocortex. This is a
Hmm.
conversation we've been having in this area for a good while now. It goes something like 200,000 years ago. Our neocortex is activated mysteriously. Neuroscientists can't explain or
Yeah.
agree on what it was. Was it cosmic rays from Cygnus? Was it group sex? Was it cooking meat, enhanced protein? Was it
I'm
psychedelics? Was it
I'm up for
extraterrestrial?
trying. I'm up for trying all those personally, but
Yeah, how about all of it? Extraterrestrials come down, we cook a steak, we have sex together, eat some
yeah,
mushrooms, look at the stars, right? Something like that.
it's a good time.
But the point is that was the moment when we became human. Because now with the activated neocortex, we have the capability of judgment, which is what Adam and Eve displayed. They knew light from dark, good from evil, man from God. Before that, they're all just in a blur. They're in the one, right? But now with the activated neocortex, we have the capacity for judgment. And that was what caused the fall of man. Adam and Eve could judge good from evil. They could become like the gods now. They could tell there was a difference. And that meant we got to go. And then suddenly we get shoved through this gate of Eden. Now we're in one of these things. And so here we are. Isn't this incredible, Michael? Whatever, let's say 200,000 years later, we're 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month away from all the human testing being accomplished on Neuralink so we can sprinkle new layer on our neocortex. give the sight to the blind, help the deaf hear, help the lame walk, even have super intelligence. I think that must have been part of the original plan by
Yeah.
whoever. If it was Enki, if it was Ptah, whatever entity or means that triggered the activation of our neocortex must have known we were going to develop AI, and this would then represent the next layer of our evolution. And here we are. You and I are the ones that are living it, making that decision. That's powerful to me.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I think in some ways it is a foregone conclusion because, so most people, I say this every time I use the word demiurge because it's become such a polluted and accreted word in terms of everyone associates that with the Gnostic demiurge, not the original Platonic demiurge.
Right.
But in the original sense, demiurge just meaning like creator consciousness.
Yeah.
We are all, so that's, by the way, what I think it means to be made in God's image is we also have this creative capacity, right? That's maybe a lower emanation or a lower fractal of that ability to create. Like maybe we can't literally create a cosmos on the scale of what we have access to, but clearly, as we've demonstrated through all different kinds of technology, we can create all kinds of other worlds, like narrative worlds, digital worlds. So I think to your point, this is in our nature. It's already a foregone conclusion that we will do this. Like whether or not we should do it, we're
Yeah.
gonna do it, man. So
Right.
you might as well strap in and get ready for it. And I'm like you, man. I'm never the first one to sign up for anything. I will sit back and I will judge, and I'm sure look, I mean, man, you remember the people who are like, I'm never going to get an iPhone. I'm never going to get a smartphone. What percentage of those people have it now? I
Right.
mean, you've got to be the most hardcore weirdo at this point to basically have stuck with any version of non-smartphone or no phone. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's the tide is coming.
Yeah.
So
And this is the problem I had with myself
yeah,
when I talk about that pillar over here, the scientific materialist pillar. Oh, this is divine. This body is divine. We got a divine gene. God wrote a message in our gene. We can't mess with this. Leave it alone. Okay. We're freezing evolution right here at this moment. And then again, as my thinking evolves, I'm like, that doesn't make any sense.
no,
That's ridiculous. That's not even logical. And that's why I've started to move over to this pillar over here and just use my own story as sort of an arc for people to think about this. Because most people, I shouldn't generalize, but I don't know if a lot of people really give this serious
yeah,
consideration from a spiritual and philosophical perspective of what exactly is happening at this moment and what it means to us from a soul perspective. And I'm just trying to not just alleviate karma I might have created over here by scaring the crap out of people, telling them they need to remain pure humans when that's completely illogical and doesn't even make sense, to shift over here and say, yeah, maybe it's okay if we start to augment ourselves because it's going to assist us in developing our light body, our ascension vehicle, and this sort of thing, which I think is a real probability here that AI will challenge us in many ways, but it will also assist us in unlocking the true power within humanity.
yeah. I think that's a great nuanced take. And last thing I'll say on this subject, just because I think it's relevant. Have you heard of Rudolf Steiner's uh, Ahrimanic Luciferian sort of dichotomy?
Yeah,
I just think that so deeply applies to because everybody points out, oh, the Ahrimanic pole sounds exactly like AI.
yeah,
Like AI is the embodiment of Ahriman. Like we need to like watch out for this thing.
right.
And yeah, in some ways, it's if he's onto something, that does sound indistinguishable. And I guess I'm not going to go into the whole backstory of this. If people want to look into
Yeah,
to this thing with Steiner, it is interesting. But the point I just wanted to make is what he's trying to say is there's essentially these two um, spiritual poles that can manifest in extremely malevolent ways, but they're also sort of just like these archetypal spiritual forces that just exist and they cyclically even manifest like in the human realm. And
right,
one of them is the Luciferian pole, which is not Luciferian in the sort of satanic way, but more Lucifer as in the light, becoming overly enamored with 5D ascension, new age woo, like we're going to spiritually bypass everything. Like that's what he means when he
Yeah.
says Luciferian. And then on the other end is the Ahrimanic. So the Ahrimanic is like, no, technology, material. We're going to free ourselves through, our own ingenuity and hyper empirical, frontal lobe type thinking, and that's what's going to get us there. And those
Right.
are both equally problematic. And what he's saying is we need to somehow square that circle or find the middle path, which he calls like the Christic path of balancing these two forces. And that's the ticket. And I feel like that's what you're saying here in some ways, if I'm not misreading you.
It's exactly what I'm saying. I just did my new workshop is called I Am X,
Mm.
and it's kind of it's a lot based on the X symbolism. But if you think about those two pillars, and you put yourself in between, and then you pretend you're at the airport getting scanned by
Yeah.
TSA, your body forms that perfect X. And because we're going to take a little bit from this pillar, a little bit from that pillar, a little bit from this one, a little bit from that one, and we'll find the X marks the spot, the sweet spot that way. It's not one pillar or the other. In fact, there's probably only one pillar to begin with, right? That's split off. And to recognize that, yeah, it's as you use the term, I really think that's appropriate, nuanced, and it's also personal. Each of
Yeah.
us have to make that decision because I started to feel like, hey, I felt like that guy saying the Beatles and the Stones are the end of civilization. The old man telling the younger generation, you can't have that technology. I don't like that.
Right.
Because I think that this new generation that's coming up, I'm 63, and you get to work with this, and you have a different perspective than I did when I was at 40, looking at this technology, and kids that are in their 20s might be a little bit different from you, and they came in the 90s cable ready. They're coming in the 2030s now, AI and transhumanism ready. They made this choice to be here at this time. And I think it's going to be a tremendously exciting time for humanity in the next even 10 to 20 years.
It's going to be interesting. That's for sure. That's
Yeah.
for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Um, let's do a total 180 from the futuristic and the current back to the ancient, because there's so much in terms of ancient wisdom that I
Right.
want to dive into with you. We were talking about ancient Egypt a little bit before, and I think we kind of just brushed up against it when we were talking about the subtle body stuff and the some of the ancient mythological stuff. But one of the things I definitely wanted to talk to you about, because you said you lead tours to Egypt, to
Yeah.
Greece, is these mysterious megalithic structures like
Mm.
the pyramids,
Hmm.
like, the various sites you see all around the world. And I'm not trying to say that all of these things were all built for one unified purpose, but I think I probably suspect something similar about their use case that I don't feel like is talked about enough, because maybe it's just because people aren't as read into the esoteric sort of ascension angle of things. But how do you think those sites play into these practices that you're so interested in, like these practices of cosmic ascent? And I guess this also ties into the question I was asking earlier about, what is a human? Why are we here? What are we trying to do, or should we be trying to do? And
Hmm.
so how do these ancient sites play into this, and what do you think the ancients knew that we've kind of largely forgotten on this point?
Wow, great question. So I think, like, especially in the case of Egypt, and you're right. A lot of my colleagues in ancient astronaut theory and that they're like, "Hey, William, how's your ascension going there, pal?" They look at it like, "What's the matter with you? That's crazy stuff." And I'm like, "It's not. This is the basis for s- the Sumerian, the Egyptian tradition. I mean, after Enki created the model human, Adapa, what was the first thing that he did with Adapa?
I
He
don't
took
know.
him up to the throne of Anu.
Hmm.
It's an ascension story, the oldest human story. Inanna's descent into the otherworld, ascension story. Second oldest story, Epic of Gilgamesh, ascension story. It's all about ascension and transformation preparatory to that ascension. They're
Yeah.
part and parcel. And so when I look at like the Great Pyramid, and I take the ancient Egyptians at face value, and they say the Great Pyramid was an instrument of ascension. It's all about transformation. It's not just, wow, how did they lift that 80-ton block of granite? Wow, how did they harvest that 1,000-ton block of red granite from the quarry there in Aswan? How'd they float it up the Nile? Blah, blah, blah. Great questions. The more important one to me is, why did they
Right.
do that? Because it facilitated their transformation. Every single temple in Egypt refers to the transformation of a human preparatory to their journey into the celestial realms to join Osiris and Orion, perhaps Isis in Sirius, or the Hathors and the Pleiades. This is the idea, and it's the missing piece. And so then you go to all these megalithic sites, Baalbek in Lebanon, or Cornwall in England, wherever they exist, Machu Picchu, Pumapunku. I think the story is consistent all over the planet that these were sites where humans gathered to commune with the divine beings and also to transform into them.
Wow. So how do you think they did that? What do you think the methods were? And I think too we should definitely focus on the preparation, because I think that's one of those things that people conveniently often omit because it's like not fun. You know, like the idea of preparing yourself through
Yeah.
maybe abstinence, maybe fasting, maybe various different kinds of protocols that are hard work, and you do to some degree have to reject your natural physical human desires, or at least learn how to put a leash on them. uh but first, yeah, how do you think they were doing it, and how do you think these sites came into play?
Well, and again, this plays into conversations about the history of technology and trying to get back through the gate. And this
Yes.
is what the megaliths would have represented: would be the gate, be it Stonehenge or the Great Pyramid. Many of the megalithic sites have connections to stories that these are in fact gateways. These are places where the heaven and earth meet, where humans can perhaps even go through that gate through a process of transformation, because the physical flesh and blood body is not going through the gate, right? No matter what you see in movies like Stargate or Contact, flesh and blood, as Paul said, cannot inherit the kingdom of heaven.
Mm.
That means there's a transformation or a transfiguration, a metamorphosis is required. How do you metamorphose the human body into a higher form? Oh, okay. Dancing, chanting, singing, prayer, meditation, interaction with higher beings, psychedelics. There are tools that are available, and for many, we must remain pure. The only way that we can transfigure the body is through meditation or chanting. I mean, I've literally been disinvited from conferences because I talk about psychedelics, and you're not allowed to introduce something external into the body in order to transfigure it, even though Jesus did, even though Mary Magdalene did, even though Isis used an oil on Osiris, even though the Archangel Michael prepared Enoch's body for his transfiguration through an oil. Can't go there because we meditate. Okay. This is kind of the argument. This is not a new argument. This has been going on for centuries, right? But I believe that more and more that psychedelics were the key component, as was lucid dreaming, because very much the psychedelic state is very similar to the lucid dream state, where you're interacting with other realms, where you're seeing strange kind of beings, where the impossible is possible. And it's in that state then that we have enhanced powers of manifestation. I know people that have healed themselves in a psychedelic journey. I've healed myself in a psychedelic journey,
Wow.
uh, emotional as well as physical pains. And so it's telling me that I think that was a big part of it. And that is why the apple is the forbidden fruit. That apple could well be a psychedelic substance of some kind, because there does seem to be a priest or a school of thought, very much part of our present day experience, that says you can't use these substances to enhance your consciousness, let alone manifest your light body. But I believe that the ancients were.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I feel like in those states, when you are heightened and you're dilated to the degree that you are, you definitely unlock other capacities. And I
Mm.
think one of those capacities for sure is the ability to sense subtle energy.
Yeah.
I mean, the sort of like vibratory hum, this sort of fractal visuals that unlock the kind of blurring together of all the senses. I do believe that you're entering probably threshold states of consciousness where you're becoming aware of sort of the permeability of these different layers of self that you're normally ignorant of or unable to sense, except for probably in very, very limited capacities, especially as human beings walking around in, Western capitalistic, outward facing, completely physical reality where we only really, if we are thinking spiritual things, we're thinking about them in very abstract kind of mental ways that are still egocentric, unless we're
Yep.
really doing the work of meditating and,
Right.
you know, doing the things that very, very few people are doing. Even
Right.
people like myself who like I go in spurts, man. Like I've had, you know, great bouts of being pretty consistent with my practices and then just not doing it for months or years, taking fairly regular, fairly significant doses of things and then not doing it for years. Like that's kind of been
Yeah.
um,
That's
my
practical.
my practice, but I don't think most people are even doing that. So
Yeah.
so I think to actually my point here is that when you do get into these states, it's so foreign and so overwhelming that you almost don't even know what you're experiencing or how to bring anything of value. I think it's valuable either way. Like, I think you will, even if you can't intellectually connect the dots, I think for sure you're somatically and non-linguistically and on a deeper level having very meaningful experiences. But I also think, to your point, that's part of the preparation. That, like, being psychically when I say psychically, I mean both psychologically and spiritually ready to glean the most you can from these states. But it also is, to some degree, I think, an intellectual thing, and that's something not a lot of people like to hear because they don't
Right.
like to unite this idea of intellect
Yeah.
and spirit. But from the Greek perspective, your intellect is part of your soul. Like, it is a capacity of your soul.
Yeah.
So I think, and this is why, part of that philosophical path is preparing the mind through
Yeah.
learning and very, like, math, logic, like being able to think in these ways so that when you transcend those ways of thinking, you're able to compile something sensical back down into your daily experience. But
I consider myself a student of Ascension as well as a practitioner. And something I took great comfort in, there was a wonderful book, Geo Windegarden, I think is his name. He
mm,
was a German scholar, 1930s, wrote a book called The Ascension of the Prophet and the Heavenly Book.
mm,
And he studied various ascension stories and found a common thread that wove through them. I had already kind of detected this, and he encapsulated it. And he said that in all these ascension stories, you've got a guy, a kind of an ordinary guy, Enoch, for example, Elijah. They were masters of ancient legends and lore. In other words, they're learning kind of the geography of what's going on out here. And at some point, they learn enough intellectually. And in these ascension stories, here comes a being from the next higher layer who manifests. And they usually will offer a book, or it could be a tablet, could be a stone, might be some sort of an object. And that represents, and they put it right in the palm of their hand.
mm.
This happens over and over again, and it represents the completion of their ascension. And this is what I coach people. It's ascension to me. I compare it to like getting a job at Kinko's, or what we call FedEx now, FedEx office.
Okay.
When you go in there, the manager doesn't want to know if you can build a copier. He doesn't need to know, can you, like, create a computer? That's already done. He just wants to know, do you have any customer service skills? Can you answer the phone? We can teach you everything else, right? And I started to view Ascension essentially that way, that at some point you learn enough, whether through a meditation or a psychedelic experience or others, where you have that interaction with that intelligence from the next higher layer, and it literally puts something into the palm of your hand and to complete your ascension. And I took
Hmm.
a lot of comfort from that, because it's saying I don't have to reinvent all of this. I just have to follow the trail. And to circle back to where we were talking a moment ago, the trail
Yeah.
then leads you to the Great Pyramid, for example, which technically should not exist. If we accept, as Egyptologists proclaim, that this was built by Bronze Age people, they didn't know pi, they didn't know phi, they didn't know the speed of light. They barely were walking around in anything but diapers. but yet we're told they built this pyramid, this edifice that encodes pi and phi in the
Right.
universal cubit and the speed of light and the circumference of the earth and all
Right.
this other math that they could not possibly have had understanding of. And what that tells me is that structures like the pyramid, megalithic structures, the pyramid, Stonehenge, and others, were probably created by beings from a higher layer as places of connection, and also ultimately as maybe even Cartesian coordinates for themselves to come and go from other layers. So you need
Mhm.
that X marks the spot that is inviolate, that is permanent if you're time traveling or traveling through other layers. And that's what I think a lot of these megalithic sites actually are.
Do you think when you say you think that they were created by higher intelligences, do you think they were created through human connection to those higher intelligences, or do you think they were literally physically created by higher intelligences?
Well, ancient astronaut theory says we had teachers, and
Yeah.
ancient astronaut theory mostly says they were physical. But what if they're beyond physical,
Yeah.
and that it's an intelligence that's downloaded into us, and however we enter into that state of being? Um, and perhaps there was literal physical connection with them, maybe even technology that is lost. You go, I was in the Serapeum a couple
Yeah.
weeks ago. This is the place where you have those 80-ton boxes with 30-ton lids. And there was an inspector there. This is an Egyptologist. This guy has probably a master's degree in Egyptology. And for the first time, I mean, I've been going to Egypt for 25 years, been led 34 tours to Egypt, and there's never been one of these guys in the Serapeum um, telling us what I'm going to tell you. We ask him, who built these? We don't know. How did they build them? We don't know. There's a lost technology. And I'm sitting there thinking, what are you watching Ancient Aliens or something? Because you're admitting exactly what we say, that this is a great mystery. There is something missing here. There's a lost technology that was involved in the creation of the Serapeum, the boxes in the Serapeum, as well as the pyramids. And once we find what that is, we have a whole new civilization. We have a green civilization. We have free energy. We have levitation. We have all kinds of wondrous new things that would emerge out of that level of consciousness and that level of technology.
Yeah. One of the things, as you being a fellow psychonaut, it sounds like that you can probably relate to, and it's a dichotomy that I'm trying to figure out, like how to balance these two things. It seems like whatever the ancients were doing, they were able to elicit some kind of desired effect through these altered states of consciousness.
Mhm.
Like, if it's the mystery temple of Eleusis, for instance, apparently it reliably somehow resulted in the manifestation of an experience of the goddess. And it's like, everybody from Herodotus to Plato, they all say that it's like the most glorious, beautiful thing. So it seemed like they were reliably able in that specific instance to elicit a certain state of consciousness.
Mhm.
And it also seems like through these correspondences between physical locations and the night sky, there was some kind of, again, desired outcome, whether it was connecting with a certain intelligence that has a correspondence in the physical sky somewhere very far away, or or what, I'm not sure, but it clearly there's some deep intention there with the placement, with whatever is going on with the larger technology of these ancient sites.
Yeah.
What do you think the interplay there is between whatever the sacrament is, or the um like, I guess to put a finer point on the question, I never know what I'm gonna get, man. Like, if I take a few grams of mushrooms, like, it is not it's gonna there is some definite archetype to the experience overall, but
Right.
I am not in control. I am
Right.
not like, I can't just be like, "I wanna have him as, like, an experience of the goddess tonight." It's gonna take me where it's gonna take me.
Right.
So, do you have any sense of how they're able to channel that into the desired effect?
Well, I think let's talk about the Book of Hebrews,
Sure.
where Jesus is identified as a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. And Melchizedek is one of these manifesting beings, born without mother, born without father. Sounds like he just kind of popped in here, sort of a thing. And the purpose of the Book of Hebrews, in my opinion, this is based on some academic work that's been done on it as well, is that Hebrews is what I refer to as an ascension simulation text, written for the Essenes,
Mm,
Jewish mystics, the tribe out of which Jesus emerged, where they would rehearse this gospel over and over again. The priest of Melchizedek manifests before you. He's this loving presence. He's going to take you on this journey into higher realms. And it's very much like the vision of Isaiah,
mm,
where he goes through seven halls or holes in space. And both the Essenes and then later the Cathars, they would rehearse this over and over in their mind until it basically would become concretized in reality. You add to that a sacrament that puts you in a state of heightened love and compassion, like love beyond love and compassion beyond earthly compassion, and in which your thoughts can more and more become instantly real. And what they say is that Hebrews was typically that the state that is described in the Book of Hebrews was typically entered into through lucid dreaming,
mm,
and that the Melchizedek priest could step through the dream portal into this reality and take individuals from this reality through the dream portal into the New Jerusalem as described in the Book of Hebrews.
mm.
Now, think about that. I mean, how much simpler do you want your ascension to be than you, again, understand this geography? Here's the experience that's going to happen. You're going to go into this altered state, either through meditation or through a sacrament. A being is going to manifest in your consciousness, and you will enter into another realm and you will stay there.
Whoa.
Well, I mean, what kind of universe do we live in when that's possible? But you know what? That's just one example of many. Another that comes to mind, I'm a art aficionado or historian. I study sacred art and have for a long time. And in particular, one example that comes to mind here is the Buddhist art that
Mm,
portrays the Amitabha Buddha of infinite light descending from the Pure Land, another layer, another Neoplatonic thought here, right? He's like the one entering into this realm. And what they have are paintings that show the Amitabha Buddha glowing and radiant, wearing a golden garment, accompanied by a retinue of attendants, bodhisattvas, all soaring on clouds. Down in the corner is the aspirant. He's a dying person who's laying in his bed, and the painting is put beside him. The Buddhists would tie silken cords to the painting with the
mm.
belief that when the soul comes out of the body at death, it can grab that silk cord and enter into the Pure Land with the Amitabha Buddha through the painting.
Whoa.
What are we talking about
Mm.
here? This is
Yeah.
quantum entanglement. This is the nature of of our multi-layered universe. And this isn't a new idea. This is 1,000-year-old idea,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's like, it's incredible. The human imagination has been thinking about what we're talking about, Michael, for a long time. And fortunately, we're starting to pay attention to what they were thinking about.
Yeah, yeah. This idea of like correspondence or sympathy, where there are
Yeah,
things here that correlate to things on higher planes of reality. I mean,
yeah,
that in a lot of ways, when you read, like I've taught. It's funny because I bring this up a lot during podcasts, but I don't even know many examples of what I'm talking about. But I generally know that there's the Hermetic text that everyone is aware of, the philosophical Hermetica, and then there's the technical Hermetica, which are way less explored because they really are technical. They're really more about here's how you make certain alloys or sacred statues or temples or whatever. And they're much less explored, much less translated, much less scholarly work has been done on them. So you can't just buy a book that goes through all of the technical Hermetica. But part of the core assumption that's within this text is that you can do things here that somehow make things sacred so that they are corresponding with the higher plane of reality or a higher version of reality. So things like whether we're talking about these ancient megalithic temples or this piece of art, this of Amitabha Buddha, Pure Land Buddhism is a whole interesting thing, by the way. It's a whole very interesting religion. But
yeah,
but whether we're talking about either of those two things, it seems like it's the same idea that they're talking about in alchemical hermetic technology, that
yeah,
you can somehow make a corresponding node of a divine quality here through a sacred artistic process,
Yeah.
and that literally will serve as a gateway to a higher realm somehow.
An example of that, my phone, I have Ptah as my screensaver, this
Mhm,
very
mhm.
specific statue of Ptah. And the reason why is because Tutankhamun was taught that Ptah lives in that statue.
Yes.
It's infused with the vibration of Ptah. When you're standing before that statue, you're literally talking to Ptah. So I made a beeline to that statue when we went to the Grand Egyptian Museum a few weeks ago because the Tutankhamun exhibit finally opened and that statue was there. I hadn't seen it since 2020. And I was ecstatic because I understand exactly what you just described. They can infuse this work of art with the frequency of a place or of a divine being or a God being, and it holds that frequency. And when you stand before it, you then are in the presence of that being. The Buddhists teach the same thing. Christian icons are based on this principle. It's fascinating. It's such an important technology, too, because people ask me all the time, what's your practice, William?
Yeah.
Do you meditate? No. Do you pray? Yeah. Yeah, of course I meditate, but prayer, chanting, dancing, singing, guitar, yeah, all that. But my foremost practice is I stare at sacred images all day.
Mm.
I'm constantly interacting with the images of the rainbow light body of Padmasambhava, knowing that the Tibetans teach that as an avatar, he can transmit his frequency through that image, through eye to eye, soul to soul contact. And so I spend all my days collecting art, studying art, interacting with that, maybe having a little assistance as I'm
Mhm.
putting magic glasses on to look at the art, like Botticelli asked us to do when looking at his works. And it all comes to life. And I'm realizing, wow, this is a beautiful conduit, just looking at an image that's infused with the frequency of that being. And people say, well, have you turned into light yet? Well, no, but 5 years ago, I did not have this mark on the middle of my forehead. But that's about when I started really engaging with Padmasambhava and his blue
Mm.
pearl that he's got right here, and focusing on manifesting my light body through my blue pearl. So that's to me a physical manifestation of, you could argue that's just coincidence that I've got this bump on the right where my third eye is that wasn't there 5 years ago. Or I can say, well, I think it's a manifestation of my spiritual practice. My physical body is responding to what I'm looking at in the art as I'm looking at it with the intention that it is feeding my light body and guiding the development of my light body.
Wow, interesting, interesting.
And that's
Somehow
Porcilio Ficino. That's the
oh, yeah.
Neoplatonists and the
Yeah.
Renaissance. That's exactly what they brought forward.
Yes, yes, yeah, Ficino is a super fascinating character. Before I forget though, one of the things when we were on this subtle body conversation, I wanted to bring up was the view of the soul in Egypt was very complex.
Yeah,
And I know a bit about it, about the Ka and the Ba, but you probably know more than I do, I'm
yeah.
guessing. Could you give an overview of the sort of idea of the soul and the subtle bodies in Egypt?
Yeah, so the ancient Egyptians had this belief that our soul has 5 parts. It's very complicated, and I think unnecessarily so. I don't know
Hmm.
why it got so complicated, but the ultimate objective was to turn into the Akh, the shining soul, Sahu, Orion, Osiris. And this is what ultimately became my logo. If you go to my Starwalker Egypt page, you'll see Sahu or Orion on the Ark of the Millions of Years, the ship of eternity, holding the Uaz scepter and holding a star in his hand. That represents the Akh or the shining spirit. And they had developed a whole quote unquote technology that involved tones,
Mm.
lights, plants, unidentified plants that trigger the production of large pulses of hormones from within our neurosecretory system that ultimately manifest the light body double, the Akh, into which our consciousness can be deposited. And then it is that part of ourself that would traverse through the gateway of the pyramid or maybe even some of the other temples.
Wow. Yeah, see, these are the missing pieces that I think would make this make a lot more sense to me. Is I don't think you can know even theoretically what they were up to if you don't also know the sort of spiritual and metaphysical POV or assumptions that they had about reality and what the human capacities really are to do this astral traveling. Because yeah,
Yeah.
there is you bring up this idea that there is this idea of the divine double
Yeah.
or the non physical double.
right.
in the Egyptian metaphysical view of the soul. And yeah, it's super fascinating.
It really is, and it makes sense too, that a part of you is incarnating here, and then to depart, we're gonna manifest that part of ourselves, knowing we're heading to another a destination, and we'll phase back into physicality if we choose to do so. This is normal, by the way, is the way I look at it. This is what we forgot after the cataclysm of the Younger Dryas, 10,000 BC. When we're told humanity is a civilization with amnesia,
Yeah.
this is what we have forgotten. It's that simple analogy where the caterpillar looking up at the butterfly saying, "You'll never get me up in one of those things." It's our culture that says, "What do you mean? Yeah, hey, William, how's your ascension going?" That kind of thing. Ha ha
Yeah.
ha. William, you really think you're gonna, do what all these other ancient prophets did? Well, yeah, I do believe that. And that's so, but our culture says, well, what is it? You got an ego problem, or, so on and so forth. We don't have a civilization that's based on this. Whereas I think the previous civilizations were based on this idea. There
Oh, for
were
sure.
teachers that survived that cataclysm, and there are certain traditions where they started to integrate that knowledge, and they utilized it. But we're the ones that are saying, that's just made up. That's just all fantasy. That's
Yeah.
religion.
That's on the train of one of my favorite hypotheses on what the UFO phenomenon really is in terms of like the physical instantiations of it is sort of the ancient breakaway
Yeah.
civilization interpretation that there
Right.
could be this group of antediluvian survivors
Yep.
that had high technology, that had some kind of high spiritual technology, that were able to do either literal feats of technology that gave them access to fly, or spiritual
Yeah.
feats that gave them
Yeah.
access to the ability to semi physically traverse the skies of the planet. And that's what we're seeing when it comes to the UFO phenomenon. I'm not
Yeah.
saying I necessarily believe that, but it's one of my more preferred
I
ways
that
of
idea,
interpreting it. Yeah.
it haunts me. I mean, I call them the secret Star Walker Society. I look for them all the
Hmm.
time, and they pop up all over the place. Oh yeah, this king knew about them, or that king, or that writer.
Yeah.
They've been around a long time, and I'm like you, Michael. I'm trying to follow the Reese's pieces to find out. Well, okay, where are y'all hidden, and can I join you?
Yeah, right.
Basically, yeah,
Yeah. Um, on this note, I guess we haven't directly addressed the most basic question that I'm sure a lot of people are interested in is how do you think what we see with the UFO phenomenon plays into everything you're talking about? What is sort of the hypothesis that you think explains? I, I've gone over all the main theses and theories. I don't think there's any single one of them that explains everything. And plus, there's always the problem of you don't know the quality of the pool of data, right? Like
yeah,
it's really hard to separate out. This is an authoritatively true story. This one's complete bullshit. This one's a maybe. Like you're always just I don't know, man. Like I don't know what level of you know conviction to put into any given story. But
yeah.
given the dirtied pool and all of these problems, what do you think we're seeing when we see UFOs? And are you able to square the circle between this idea of physical crafts that may be in hangars somewhere and all of this other more non-physical stuff we're talking about, or are you perplexed by the interplay between all of these elements too?
I'm totally perplexed. In fact, if I may, on May 16th in Nashville, I'm hosting the Non-Human Intelligence Question,
Mm.
a one-day event with my friend Dr. Travis Taylor and Dr. Wiz von Verk,
Oh
because
yeah.
I'm convinced that somewhere in there between simulation theory of Riz and what Travis knows about NHI and warp craft and wormholes and my sense about spirituality and the soul, we're trying to feel the elephant in the room, and I feel like it's somewhere in that combination.
Yeah, I had Riz on recently. Really
Oh,
enjoyed rapping with him, and I
yeah,
think we're even more on the same page than I kind of thought we would be going into the conversation, and I assumed we would be close to on the same page. But given that, where do you lean? Like, are there any mainstream thinkers in the sort of history of ufology and phenomena stuff that you're like, yes, I think they're on the right track? Have you really had to develop your own sort of?
I kind
summary?
of
What do you
have,
think?
because I'm a little bit not oddball, but again, especially within the ancient astronaut theory community, and I'm 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 still pretty hardcore as a Christian, and that story, which is different. I'm very interested in spirituality and especially the layers idea, and so that makes me somewhat of an outlier. I personally believe that it's all about personal transformation, that it's 99 the traditional view is that the UFOs are 99% technology and maybe 1% spirituality. I think it's the other way around. I think it's
Mhm.
99% spiritual, 1% technological. And that in order to understand exactly what this technology is, we've got to upgrade ourselves spiritually, that there's a consciousness especially component to this, and morals and ethics that go with it, and we're aiming in that direction, but we're not quite there yet.
Yeah, no, it seems like we're definitely not quite there yet, but the clues are just so tantalizing, and I don't know if we will be there. I think like like directly related to this question is the question of disclosure, right?
Mhm.
Like obviously we it just I would say for like since the New York Times article, man, it's been like, wow, we are really on the precipice of exposure of disclosure, and then it's like we've been moving millimeter by millimeter. I swear it's coming. I swear it's coming. I swear the moment
Yeah,
is coming. Some people would argue, like, no, we've had it. They've said, in front of Congress, they've said non-human intelligence, they've said biologics, they've said
yeah,
craft. A lot of other people are like, nah, I don't. We have not gotten enough for me to want to call it disclosure. And then there's people like me, and I sincerely question what level of disclosure they would even be capable of
right.
giving, because if the conversation goes in the direction that you and I are interested in, do are the generals sitting around reading Iamblichus and Plotinus? And I don't think so. Some of them maybe. There's a couple names that have been bringing things in this direction up
Yeah.
in passing in talks and stuff. So I'm like, maybe they do know more than I think they know. But yeah, what on this question of disclosure, do you think there is something coming? Do you think they're just going to kick the can down the road forever and
You
mislead
know,
us and
I
psyop us? Or
I talked with Dr. Travis Taylor about this just a month ago. Remember when President Obama was on that podcast and
yeah,
said aliens are real, but I haven't seen one?
yeah,
And Area 51 is what? I can't remember exactly what he said. And then
they're not in Area 51. They're not underground or whatever. Yeah,
right, right. And
yeah.
then the next day, Peter Doocy asked President Trump on Air Force One, and Trump says, "Oh, that's classified. He shouldn't have said that." And Travis's reply to that was, "That was disclosure right there. That's as good as it's going to get." And
Hmm.
that's an insider speaking, giving that assessment, because obviously Obama is not interested in this subject. Trump is not interested in this subject. It's not like they're going to come out and give us a whole lecture on the history of humanity's interaction with UFOs or aliens. They could care less, right? They don't know anything about it, which is bizarre by their own admission. And so that's telling me that maybe Travis is right. That was disclosure right there, and everything else will now just sort of be a tortured kind of ripple effect from there. Perhaps a little bit here, a little bit there, coming out. But I refer back to the Gospel of Matthew's second coming, when Christ returns to earth and gathers the elect from across the four winds of the universe on earth.
Hmm.
That's the disclosure I'm looking for. That's the one I'm really interested in. Wonder, okay, are we going to see signs of that? Not that there's going to be like you're going to see suddenly Jesus returning as a 5'10" Jewish guy with long hair weighing 165 pounds like you see on the Shroud of Turin, but maybe a consciousness, and perhaps there will be a gathering of the elect from across the universe
Hmm.
on Earth. That is what really excites me, because then that's just not disclosure. That's a revelation, and that is a welcoming of humanity to a greater family that we know already exists out there.
Well, if that did happen, how do you think that would manifest? What would that look like? Would it look like a heightening of consciousness? Would it look like technological breakthroughs? What do
Yeah,
you
it
think?
would be well, according to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, it would be, you would have a war against radical Islam. You might see the United States attacking Iran to wipe out radical Islam. You will see a race to get the Ark of the Covenant and return it to the Temple Mount. You will see the Temple Mount being a focal point of contention. You will see moves made by various governments, like the United States government, to move their capital from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. You will see Christ touted as the religion of America. You will see the Bible read in public spaces again. This will all be, things signposts to watch out for. That hey, they're following a Revelation script.
Mm. So that sounds like a kind of malevolent version, a scary version.
I don't want to say a misunderstood version, but a literal interpretation of it, and
Yeah.
that is scary. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. But if that thing that you said you want to happen of the elect from the four corners
The
of
four
the
winds.
four winds actually having this moment, how do you think that would take shape?
Well, I think it would start with what we're already seeing with the Tic Tac and Go Fast
Mm.
videos, a demonstration of a technology 1,000 years in advance of anything we've got, at least according to Lou Elizondo and another insider. You'll start to see public attention start to have to wake up to what is actually happening here, like Travis did when he did the analysis of the Tic Tac video, and what we have in public is just a few paragraphs of his original 250-page report, where he basically concludes that the Tic Tac doesn't have a material existence in our realm.
Mm.
It's a projection from a higher realm. And what we're starting to see then, I think, are those revelations or intimations for sure of that higher layer, and more craft, and perhaps even beings, apparitions like the Virgin Mary or things like that, that are demonstrable appearances of a being from that next higher layer, doing things and leaving relics from that higher layer as Reese's pieces for us to follow and to understand the physics of that higher layer and how we are merging with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where I lean as well. And I think like to throw the same question back on myself, if you're interested, of
Yeah,
the
please.
what hypotheses are the ones, or thinkers are the ones who I felt like were on the right track. I like a lot of what John Keel had to say in terms of
Right.
like the notion that whatever we're experiencing, when we're experiencing the high weirdness of the phenomenon and other, whether it's what seem to be craft, or even cryptids manifesting, is exactly what you're saying. It's more like something subtle that
Yeah.
has appeared temporarily in some kind of like window area, or window in space time for whatever reason, where something from an like extended electrodynamic, or uh higher realm, if you want to put it that way, part of reality that we're totally ignorant to, unable to sense, at least currently with our scientific instruments, manifesting here temporarily through some kind of intermediary, uh, daimonic, not demonic, but daimonic
Right.
kind of expression. I think that's where I go. But just like almost everyone in ufology, he still falls prey to the there's doom and gloom on the horizon. Like I read Operation Trojan Horse recently, and he always wants to go, unfortunately, to you know uh this technological, like, one of the things he said was the phone system in this country is overloaded, and we know the airwaves can't contain much more than what they have now, and something's going to have to change, something's going to have to give. This is like, this cataclysm is about to happen. And
Yeah.
there always has to be this weird tinge of urgency and fear, and
Right.
that I reject. But I generally love his sort of ultra terrestrial hypothesis that goes in that sort of, um I guess, it's something subtle before it's gross kind of hypothesis.
Right. Jacques Vallée,
Yes.
similar point of view as well with the interdimensionals. Yeah. And this is being intimated, of course, not just intimated, spoken of directly by like Tim Burchett. It's
Yeah.
all weirder than people can imagine, sort of a thing. And I think that's, very going to be very true. And that's partly what's so exciting too. I mean, we're very clearly, if you're not on the edge of your seat right now, you're not paying attention. I mean, it's very clear that our consciousness is expanding, our universe is expanding, everything is going exponential right now.
Yeah. Well, in the last few minutes, tell us about this book that you have out, because we barely we've glanced up against the sort of uh psychedelic Christianity angle, but we haven't really gone deep into it. I want to at least touch on it because it is a
Thank you.
juicy one.
Thank you. Yeah, my book is called The Psychedelic Christ, The Lost Dose of the Son of Man. And I had wrote it over the past few years. I had been collecting books about psychedelics and Christianity and elsewhere for a couple of decades. And by the way, I wasn't even actively experimenting with any psychedelics until 2022.
Hmm.
It just wasn't part of my thing. I didn't feel called, but boy, when I felt called, I answered that call in a really dramatic way, and it was life changing. And I realized that many of the instances that we're referring to otherworldly substances, we're actually talking about psychedelics. And so, especially in the Christ story, I mean, he's very direct in numerous instances, saying he is not from this world. He's from the world above. We're from this world here, the world below. And he even says in Hebrews, I am not from this creation. And so I started looking at looking at Christianity really through the lens of simulation theory first,
Hmm.
and then started noticing the psychedelic component that went along with it and decided to focus on that. A lot of books have been written about Christianity and psychedelics. Mine is a little different in that I'm not taking the position of a flamethrower. I'm not, like trying to say Christ is just a mushroom or things like that. I'm looking at the whole historical context of, as you mentioned, the Eleusinian mysteries and a couple
Yeah.
of thousand years of civilization that were utilizing psychedelics in a very constructive way up until and including the time of Jesus. So it's not unusual that Jesus would be talking about psychedelics or using them. It would have been unusual if he did not.
Yeah.
And so I put it into that context. And then I had done a lot of work on the anointing oils of Mary Magdalene, having had an interest in her story for a long time and recognizing, hey, there's some really profound stuff going on in these stories about oils that can transmute the body into light, or Jesus' little brother James walking around with an oil of joy that could put people into a state of ecstasy and pure love instantly. And I'm thinking, well, wait a
Hmm.
minute, that sounds like MDMA to me
Right. Yeah.
when used in a sacramental setting, not in a party setting, but when you go inside and you put the mask on and that serotonin starts flowing within you. That sounds like the rivers of life and the rivers of light that Jesus is talking about and the living waters flowing within us. There's a perfect biochemical correspondence to this. I'm not saying MDMA is what they were talking about, because obviously MDMA is something that was synthesized, but the effect of it is exactly what Jesus is talking about. Free yourself of guilt, free yourself of shame, revert to your original divine nature, feel this cosmic love and joy through eating this substance or anointing this oil or putting this oil on your eyelids and seeing very clearly the true nature of the universe. These are all psychedelic experiences that are recorded. Paul on the road to Damascus, he's going along and he suddenly sees Jesus manifest as a being of light. It's a classic psychedelic experience where he's on the path. He's maybe enjoyed some edible. It doesn't say so, but he suddenly has this profound experience and it changes him. It alters him. And that's classic psychedelia we're talking about.
Yeah, and particularly when you place it in the context of these ancient mystery traditions and cults, and you remove the stigma, right? Because the stigma that we have in a modern sense probably did not exist back then, or at least not to the degree that it
No,
does now.
they didn't have an
Like,
FDA breathing down their neck saying this
right.
can and can't do with your consciousness. Yeah.
Yeah, I obviously haven't had a chance to check your book out yet, but I loved. Have you read Immortality Key by Brian Muraresku?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely love that book for
yeah.
sure.
He
Yeah.
does such a good job of, and I think what, again, like you, what makes him so interesting is he's not afraid to sacrifice some sacred cows, but he's also not taking a flamethrower because I believe he comes from a Catholic background,
Yep.
and I think still considers himself a Catholic, even though he's clearly not a very dogmatic one.
Right.
But yeah, he really places it in the context of like, look, this is what was going around going on around Jesus in his time. These are the Greco-Roman mystery cults that existed. This is probably, when we're looking at like the Bacchic cults and we're looking at the pharmacon that they used, and
Uh-huh.
then you start looking at how deep actually their knowledge of botanical and pharmacological substances were. Like, they've been doing this for hundreds or thousands of years by this
No doubt.
point. So there's a huge tradition
No
that we're
doubt.
just pretending to be ignorant of, or that we uh, somehow pretend that this group of early Christians who wouldn't have even been like, the distinction of Christian is something that comes like 100 years later.
For sure.
Um, like, yeah, the idea that they would somehow be separate from what's going on within the larger spiritual context is like totally false. And then that changes the way that you look at the whole thing. So I think it's a very logical assumption to make that the Eucharist or whatever would have been some kind of uh, you know, psychoactive substance potentially.
Yeah, the subtitle of the book is The Lost Dose of the Son of Man, which the Son of Man is the title that Jesus used for himself. He didn't call himself very often Christ or Messiah because those are politically and religiously loaded.
Hmm.
He called himself the Son of Man. Well, there's 81 references to that term, the Son of Man, in the New Testament. The Son of Man is a title for Jesus. In traditional Christianity, it means he was able to embody the divine in a human body. The Son of Man is just a humble human being. But then they talk about the Son of Man as an edible, as something akin to manna, this star food. And when
Oh,
the disciples ate the Son of Man, what happened? Oh, they saw this divine presence around Jesus, this glowing radiance, luminosity, rainbow colored around him. Oh, when they ate the Son of Man, they saw the Son of Man as the stairway to heaven, a cosmic access with angels ascending and descending. When they ate the Son of Man, they were transformed from a mortal human into a Son of Man capable of ascending the stairway to heaven. Well, wait a
hmm.
minute. This is sounding like some kind of a technology to me. This is sounding like this is an edible. It's also a teaching. It's about transformation. It's like a whole package of things that all go together that are lost to contemporary Christianity.
Hmm. I didn't know they talked about the Son of Man as being edible. Where
Yeah.
is that?
Yeah, this is where Jesus describes the bread of life as the manna and
Ah,
refers to it as the bread of the Son of Man. And when you eat it, that's the true food, and it works along with the true drink, the true wine.
fascinating. So do you hypothesize that it's any specific substance? Do you have a theory on that part of it?
I think it's this. I know the effect of the substance is, as I mentioned a moment ago, strikingly similar to medical doses of MDMA, which floods our consciousness with serotonin and puts us in a space of elevated love and joy and
Mhm.
enables us to make these connections that ordinarily are imperceptible to us. So that's very close to it. And I wrote a whole chapter about MDMA in the book and its effect. And for example, it's well known that the psychiatrists that first started using MDMA in San Francisco in the 70s referred to it as Adam. They called it Adam because it had the effect in one session of freeing people from guilt and shame and trauma and taking us back to our place of original purity.
Wow.
And that is certainly what they're describing with the sacrament of the Son of Man in the New Testament, that exact experience. And so I had the MDMA chapter in the text. I ended up putting it in the appendix because I didn't want to be telling people or beating them over the head with the possibility that, hey, MDMA is a very similar experience to what they're describing here. But it was really great timing for me because within, what was it, 2 weeks of publishing the book on March 26th, you got the Trump administration now fast tracking MDMA for trauma and also for PTSD, along with ibogaine and psilocybin.
Yeah.
So it's like what I was hearing throughout my research is that our culture is shifting and we need these substances today. We need these substances, these molecules. We need this lost sacrament that will free us from all the baggage that we're dragging around, open up our consciousness so that now we can begin to think like higher level beings and then be able to better harmonize ourselves with AI and transhuman technology ultimately.
God, yeah, yeah. It is long overdue. It is definitely long overdue. I've been going to the MAPS conference, the last
Oh,
couple
cool.
I've gone to, and the first one I went to was when the phase 3 trials were going on for MDMA, and everyone believed like it is on the precipice of, it's been blessed, it's going to go through, and then it didn't. It ended up not
Right.
going through. I think the
Yeah.
following year, and the whole kind of industry was in this huge soul searching phase of like we really might be screwed here. Like we've kind of exhausted all of the um appeal processes, and are going to have to like rework and re-raise all this money all over again. But
Right.
yeah, thank God. I mean, no matter what you think about Trump as a person or politically or whatever, like I'm so stoked that it is
Yep.
finally going through and it's long overdue.
It truly
um
is.
well, my friend, this has been so much fun. I love being able to just go all over the place with you, and I love like it's such a joy to have somebody on who has all the same interests as me and is deeply read in all the areas that I'm also really interested in, and can just riff and hop from subject to subject. So this is so much fun, man. Thank you for doing this.
Oh, it's been my honor and pleasure. Thank you, Michael, so much. I've enjoyed every moment of it and hope we'll get a chance to talk again soon. Maybe even more depth about my book.
Yeah, would love to. Would love to.